Hello and welcome back to Wyoming Watch from the Wyoming Tribune-Eagle. I'm Noah Zahn, your state government reporter here. Earlier this week, the Wyoming Supreme Court ruled that abortion will remain legal in the state, deeming 2 attempted bans unconstitutional. The ruling stated that a woman has a fundamental right to make her own healthcare decisions, including an abortion. This decision was met with substantial opposition from state officials, and by Tuesday afternoon, Governor Mark Gordon had released a statement saying he has asked the Attorney General's office to file a petition for rehearing. This week on Wyoming Watch, our crime and public safety reporter Ivy Secrest speaks with Dr. Rene Hinkle, an OB-GYN at Cheyenne Women's Clinic. Dr. Hinkle is one of the medical providers who is a plaintiff on the case that has been unfolding over the past few years. Here's that conversation with Ivy now.
I'm here today with Dr. Rene Hinkle, an OB-GYN at Cheyenne Women's Clinic, who was a petitioner on the legal challenge to 2 laws restricting abortion access, which were overturned by the state Supreme Court on Tuesday. Rene, thank you for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for inviting me.
Fantastic. As someone who was very involved with this case, the minute updates of it throughout the past year or so, multiple years that this has been going on, can you walk me through what this was and what happened on Tuesday?
Sure. We filed the lawsuit after the trigger ban was put into effect in 2022, and that was after Roe v. Wade was overturned by the United States Supreme Court. And the Wyoming legislature had passed a trigger law which would ban all abortions after 6 weeks should that overturn of Roe v. Wade happen. And so in July of 2022, a group of attorneys supported by some abortion activists were able to gather a group of petitioners, and so it was another physician and myself. The Chelsea's Fund, which is a fund donated by a Wyoming family that literally helps pay for abortions for women of Wyoming, along with Wellspring, which is the clinic, the procedure clinic in Casper, and 2 civilians were gathered together and became the petitioners for a lawsuit to try and overturn that abortion ban. And so it was heard up in Jackson, and Judge Owens was our judge. She did immediately stay the law, and so abortions have remained legal since that time. And in the ensuing 2 years after that, the legislature did pass 2 more laws, one that took over the trigger ban and became even more restrictive for abortions. It was called Life as a Human Right Act. And so it basically stated in there all of these things that the legislature wanted to be true, that life begins at conception and that life has rights from the minute of conception, and those types of things that have not been proven or not been made into law or dogma. But they wanted them to be true, so they put them in the law. They also added a bill that would outlaw medication abortion, the medications used for abortion. And so we then, the attorneys that we were working with, then were able to switch those bills. And so then we, instead of the trigger law, which was no longer active, we started a lawsuit against the new law, which also was fairly immediately stayed by the judge. She finally made her decision in December of 2024, and she ruled in favor of our lawsuit, which the basic gist of it was to say that abortion is healthcare, And the Constitution was amended, the Wyoming Constitution was amended in 2012 to say that all health care is basically the right of a person to make their own choices, that each person that is capable is able to make their own choices for health care. And so given that statute in the Constitution, women should be able to make those choices for themselves because abortion is health care. And Judge Owens agreed with that. And so that was the ruling in December of 2024. Following that, the government appealed, and it was heard in front of the Wyoming Supreme Court in April. And the ruling finally came out on Tuesday, January 6th, that they agreed, they upheld the decision that Judge Owens made to state that because of the Constitution saying that each person can choose their own health care, and the fact that abortion is health care, that they upheld the decision so that abortion is still legal in Wyoming.
Absolutely. And for our listeners, that's the state constitution. It's
Correct.
Article 1, Section 38 that you'll see legislators referring to when they're talking about this decision. The amendment was initially in response to the Affordable Care Act and Obamacare.
Correct.
And it does pretty explicitly state that those who are protected under the Wyoming Constitution have the right to make their own medical decisions.
Correct.
In that moment, as someone who, was wanting this outcome, what was your gut reaction to the Supreme Court's decision on Tuesday?
Oh, gosh, it was a huge relief. We've been talking about this and working on it for over 3 years now. And so I've been testifying against abortion restrictions for over 10 to 15 years in front of the legislature in Wyoming. And so to finally have a positive outcome was an amazing relief. I mean, I think we all felt pretty confident in our belief that this is the correct answer, that abortion is health care. I mean, in my mind, that is not even a question. Abortion is health care. It is part of women's health care that is necessary. And as we've spoken before, there are increased deaths in the states. Women are dying. Women are dying. I'm not talking about babies, fetuses, anything like that. Women are dying at a higher rate in states where there are abortion bans. And so that is one of the main reasons that I'm here, that I do this, that I try to keep abortion safe and legal, to try and help women have better health care and to be able to manage that health care in the best way they see fit. So it was a huge relief. And as we'll talk about later, it comes with the idea knowing that it's not over. This is not the end of the sentence. This is just the beginning of the paragraph. And so we just have to, keep going. But it was definitely a huge happy moment to say, wow, somebody else agrees that with our assessment of abortion and the Constitution in Wyoming.
Fantastic. And you mentioned keeping it legal and safe. And I know we've heard a lot about the legal side of things. That is our court system that kind of hammers that out, the legislature in tandem with the court system. But when we're talking about keeping it safe, I mean, you're a doctor, you're an OB-GYN, you are working with patients who are in the midst of pregnancy or pursuing pregnancy, are dealing with their reproductive health. What does keeping abortion safe look like? What's that part of this?
Well, I think that's part that most people don't talk about very often. And one of the main things is that abortion has always happened. I mean, abortion has been going on for as long as women have been getting pregnant. Long before there were medical procedures to have it done. Women were doing it on their own. There were herbal remedies and there were things. So abortion will always be done. It's just a matter of how safe they are. So if they're not legal, then they'll be doing them in an illegal fashion, and those are less safe, and more women will die. And so keeping it legal and safe, medical abortion is incredibly safe. I mean, the complication rate from medical-induced abortions is incredibly low, less than 1%, like 0.1%. And so that complication rate would definitely increase if abortions are not legal, because abortions, again, will continue no matter what laws are out there.
Mm-hmm. I think another aspect of this, when we're looking at laws, we're looking at safety. That also means looking at access. In Wyoming, we have individual providers, such as yourself, who might have to make or help someone make that decision in a more emergent medical sense. But we also have Wellspring Health Access, which is the only abortion clinic in the state that does procedural abortions. What does this decision mean for access in Wyoming for both providers like yourself and providers like Wellspring Health Access?
So Wellspring will be able to offer, again, the full line of services that they offer. They offer reproductive health, so they offer birth control. They offer routine female exams, so pap smears, STD checking, all the different types of birth control options that are available, along with counseling and abortions. So they offer the medication abortion. They also are able to offer procedural abortions there as well for abortions that can't happen with medications, because medication abortions are only safe and effective up through 10 weeks. And so they will be able to offer the full range of their care, which is a fabulous benefit for the women in Wyoming. We are also surrounded by several states that have bans on abortion, and so we do have people coming in from other states, from South Dakota, from Idaho, as well as all the women in Wyoming. So they will continue to be able to offer that service to the women who are being denied it in their own state. I do not do elective abortions. That's just not part of my medical care. But what this decision means for the general OB-GYNs in the state of Wyoming is that there's not a question about how we can take care of our patients if they need to have a procedure done that would constitute an abortion. So if we have somebody with a fetal anomaly that is life-threatening to the fetus, we can offer that delivery without any concern about our ability to continue to practice medicine. And so we will then also be able to practice our full scope of procedures for women in their reproductive years, and that's huge, to not have to question. We have people question all the time, even though it was still legal in Wyoming, because there were these laws, a lot of physicians would question whether or not they could do a procedure that they should be doing for the patient without endangering their ability to continue to practice medicine. There are possibility of fines or jail time or things like that. We've had a lot of women leave the state, a lot of OB-GYNs leave the state. I know one who left the state because of all the concerns with abortion and abortion care just from Cheyenne. So it definitely does happen, and we've had a really hard time recruiting into the state. We have all the maternity deserts across the state of Wyoming, and our abortion laws have not helped that at all. This idea that you could go to jail for doing your job is a very difficult part of being a physician. And if you can go somewhere where that's not a question, then a lot of times people choose that. So it will help OB-GYNs in the state be able to do their full range of care, and it will help our peace of minds knowing that we can do that without threat at this point. So it will help physicians. It will help the women. Women will have all of the options available to them, and they don't have to feel, as guilty because they're not being made to feel guilty by the government if they choose what is appropriate care for themselves and their families.
Mm-hmm. I think the guilt thing kind of brings us into not everyone, not all of our state leaders or legislators or advocates in the state were thrilled about this decision. And I'm curious, seeing the governor respond the way he did, condemning the decision, seeing our Secretary of State, Chuck Gray, make a similar statement, both being incredibly disappointed with the way that the Supreme Court ruled, seeing several calls to reevaluate how we appoint judges, because of claims that those judges don't reflect the values of the state. What was your then secondary reaction to seeing just how vast that disappointment in the decision was as well?
Yes, I think it's important to realize that these judges were appointed. Our Wyoming Supreme Court judges are appointed by governors, and I'm pretty sure all of these current judges were appointed by Republican governors. So to hear the Freedom Caucus members talking about how they're appointed by liberals, how they're liberal right wing or liberal left wing, Democrats, or how they, are woke, or whatever the words are that they're using, is quite disappointing. These are very smart, very learned judges. They've had good careers in law. They took their time. They took over 6 months actually, they took 8 months to make this decision, and the decision was based on the law. And our Constitution states plainly, in plain language, that each competent person has the right to choose their own health care. They point to the fact that was not why that constitutional amendment was placed in there. But all you can do in the law is to read what it says and to follow it. And so it's not up to the judges to think about what did the legislators 13 years ago mean when they wrote this. That's not their job. Their job is to read the actual words and to follow that. So they did that job. And to denigrate them and to say they're not doing their job or they're being political is inappropriate, because they truly were following the letter of the law. Even the governor says, yes, they have decided the legal challenges behind this. And so he is even in agreement that they followed the letter of the law, whether he likes the decision or not. And so that was disappointing. My disappointment in the governor's response was then his question about the moral question about abortion. And in my opinion, that is not something that should be legislated. The moral opinion about abortion should be each individual person's moral compass, each individual person's morality within themselves. It should come from within and not from the government. So I have absolutely zero concerns with people who don't agree with abortion. They're completely within their rights to not agree with abortion, and they shouldn't have one, and they shouldn't, let their families have one, or they should talk to their family members about that. They should, they should keep that for themselves, because that's how they believe, and that's perfectly within their right. They just don't have the right to tell everyone else what their morals should be and whether or not they should be able to have an abortion or not. That's an individual decision. That's an individual right. And so each person's morality should be each person's morality, and the government should not try to legislate morality. So that was my disappointment with the governor's response. I won't even go into Chuck Gray's response. It's not worth it.
When we're talking about legislating morality, there has been a lot of counter arguments made comparing abortions to murdering babies. Mm-hmm. I've seen people make comparisons to if someone were to attack a pregnant woman, legally we recognize the loss of a fetus, those kinds of things. I'm curious, from a medical perspective, what is the medical difference between deciding to address an ectopic pregnancy as opposed to suffering damage to a pregnancy because of external violence or harm?
Yes, there has not been consensus across the world, across humanity yet about the definition of when a fetus becomes a person. And some of the conservative right-wing groups have decided amongst themselves that life occurs with conception, and that therefore they should have all full rights of person and personhood from that moment on. As an OB-GYN physician, when I see a pregnant person, I do see two separate things. However, the fetus, the baby that's growing in there, cannot survive without the mom for a long period of time. I mean, the majority of the pregnancy, that fetus can't survive outside. And so it's very difficult for me as a person to say, oh, they have all the same rights that I do as a person when they can't survive. If the mom were to die, the baby dies. And there's nothing we can do about that. And so there's quite a bit of a nuance there. And, I deal with miscarriage just about every single day. We deal with ectopic pregnancies every month. And we see babies die, stillbirths, etc. So having done that for the 30 years that I've done this, it would be very difficult if every single one of those was equivalent to the death of a woman patient that I have. Mm-hmm. So, we think about pregnancy quite a bit differently because of knowing that so many things rely on the woman. And pregnancy affects women physically and emotionally. And, there are some complications that could cause a woman to die. Mm-hmm. We had a woman in Texas die because she had severe preeclampsia and wasn't treated because she was before the baby was viable, so they couldn't do the delivery. And she died because they wouldn't take the fetus at 20 weeks, even though she had severe preeclampsia, because the baby wouldn't survive. So trying to put the exact same rights onto that fetus doesn't feel right to me, because that fetus is not an individual. Women, our patients, are individuals, and they should have the rights that are given for people in the state of Wyoming and in the United States. But a fetus, until it can survive on its own. And part of the difference is the religious aspect of that. In the Jewish faith, it's not truly alive, a person, until they're separated from the mom. Mm-hmm. And so, you have people of Jewish faith who have that belief, and then you have people of Catholic or Christian faith, some Christian faiths, who believe that life happens at conception and they should have the same rights. So these are different beliefs, and yet, again, we can't put all those beliefs on every single person in the United States. So we all do have to be able to have our own belief system and our own, again, morality. And so doing something in one religion may not be the same as the other. So therefore, we have separation of church and state, and so it should not be a religious offering that we base this on.
So what I'm hearing you say is, first and foremost, your patient is the mother, because the life of the fetus is dependent on the mother for the vast majority of a pregnancy.
Correct.
And then the decisions that are made through that pregnancy are personal. They can be religious, moral, guided by some other ethic, but they're individual and shouldn't be legislated.
Correct.
We have a good number of legislators, you mentioned the Freedom Caucus, for example, who do believe that that ethic should be legislated and are already making moves to have something on the governor's desk in this upcoming budget session. I know that Tuesday was a big victory. You already mentioned that this is not the end of this. What does this issue look like going forward into the upcoming session?
Again, I would hope that given the actual decision that the Wyoming Supreme Court made, which actually said that it had strict scrutiny, and strict scrutiny is the highest level that you can have from a legal standpoint, which means that in order to get over that, any bills, any laws that would come through would have to meet that strict scrutiny, and it would be very difficult to, given our current Constitution. So I would hope that they would then put their time, effort, energy into what the governor requested, which is a constitutional amendment. I think most of us in the space of advocating for abortion rights would say, yes, take it to the people. We believe that the majority of people in Wyoming believe that each individual in Wyoming should have their choice for their own medical care, for their own health care, and that women should have equal rights and should have the ability to have that right without control from a government entity. And so make it a good constitutional amendment and take it to the people and let the people decide and stop trying to piecemeal restrictions to abortion in the guise of protecting women. It doesn't protect women, it just controls women. And so doing something that allows the people in the state to finally have their say and not have it based on a particular political party.
Yeah, so there were quite a few calls to put it to a vote to write up some sort of additional constitutional amendment, and I believe in the summary of the opinion, even the Supreme Court themselves mentioned that should there be a constitutional amendment, then that could potentially change where we stand with abortion in the state, but as the Constitution stands, or as the state Constitution stands, we are where we are. I know you've just talked a lot about how you hope that legislators put their efforts into constructing some sort of constitutional amendment and put it to the people. We have also seen this, particularly this class of legislators, form multiple bills to address a single issue, kind of flooding the plane with multiple different bills addressing one thing. Do you have any concerns that in addition to a constitutional amendment, legislators will also work on additional abortion restrictions?
Given past history and knowing the Freedom Caucus as we have now in our current legislature, I'm sure they will try and put forth multiple bills to try and again, restrict abortion in multiple different ways. We've seen it across the country. We've seen it in multiple states, from Ohio and Missouri, Kentucky. I mean, multiple states have multiple different bills out there. And basically what these legislators do is copycat. They take those bills and they put them into our legislature to try and get them passed in Wyoming. So I'm sure there will be some of those bills. I would hope that the leadership would try to decrease the numbers given the short session that we have. It's only a 20-day session, and trying to get a budget passed, which is questionable whether they'll be able to pass the budget or not, which is their primary goal. That's actually their one job for this session. And so I would hope that they would decrease the numbers, but I am sure there will be some other bills trying to restrict abortion.
Well, thank you, Rene. I really appreciate you coming on and talking about this issue with your personal expertise in it. And yeah, well, I guess we'll just have to see what happens in the session.
Yes. And again, I hope we come out of this, with women's rights to abortion intact. And we will do everything we can to try and keep that going.
Now, here's Taylor Staples, our arts and entertainment reporter, to bring you a roundup of upcoming events in the area this week.
Today, January 9th, there's a living room conversation session about finding stillness in the modern world from noon to 1 p.m. for adults at the library. There's also the Cheyenne Home Show taking place at the Archer Event Center from noon to 6 p.m. today. The show will also be on display tomorrow from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. and Sunday from 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. Tomorrow, January 10th, there's a Makers Market vendor show from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. at the Frontier Mall, a community volunteer fair from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. at the Laramie County Senior Center, a women's self-defense class at 1212 Ridge Road from noon to 2 p.m., and an evening of bluegrass with Jim Hurst at the library. From 2 to 3:30, Hurst will teach adults about guitar's roots in bluegrass, and from 5 to 7 p.m., he'll perform a concert. On Sunday, January 11th, there's Meowingo from 1 to 3 p.m. at the Cats and Coffee Connections Cafe. On Monday, January 12th, there's a Cowgirls of the West luncheon at 11:30 a.m. at Little America, where Mary Guthrie will be speaking on the history of prohibition in Wyoming. On Tuesday, January 13th, from 9:30 to 11:30 a.m., the Cheyenne Women's Connection has their monthly meeting at the Red Lion Inn. This month, they'll be touching on caring for special needs children and dealing with familial deaths. Also, the library will be hosting a time capsule crafting event from 4 to 5 p.m., as well as time for people to discuss the Wyoming budget with legislators from 6 to 7:30 p.m. On Wednesday, January 14th, there are business inquiry drop-in times from 9 to 11 a.m. for adults at the library, as well as an AARP meeting at the Senior Center from 12:30 to 2 p.m. There's also chair yoga and poetry at the library from 2:30 to 3:30 p.m. Finally, on Thursday, January 15th, there's a Read to a Therapy Dog session from 4 to 5 p.m. at the library, as well as a Teen Writing Club workshop from 4 to 5, and a Crafty Creatures Club meeting for grades 3 through 6 from 6 to 7 p.m. Those events are both also at the library. For a full list of events, go to wyomingnews.com/calendar.
And finally, before we close out today, here's a quick recap of some of our top stories and headlines from the past week. Casper-based businessman Reed Reisner has officially announced his candidacy for Wyoming's sole seat in the U.S. House of Representatives, becoming the second entrant into the race following Secretary of State Chuck Gray's announcement at the end of 2025. Reisner is a conservative Republican who previously unsuccessfully challenged incumbent Senator John Barrasso in 2024. A suspect charged with felony second-degree murder in connection with the fatal shooting at West Wind's mobile home park has signed a plea agreement, according to court documents. Last June, Nathan Pfaff, who was 19 years old at the time, was arrested in connection to the death of 18-year-old Ryan Snow. Plans are moving forward on a proposed power plant and a data center campus south of Cheyenne following the Laramie County Board of Commissioners' approval this week of the two facilities' site plans. And finally, Cheyenne's third oldest brewery, Accomplice Beer Company, recently announced it is permanently closing at the end of the month. The closure was announced on the company's Facebook page Tuesday and includes closing The Good Egg, which opened as a part of Accomplice in November 2019. That's all for this week's episode. Thank you for tuning in to Wyoming Watch, and be sure to check back next Friday for more.